Welcome to my review of Jackal for the NES. And this was one of my favorite games back when I owned it. This was one of the first NES games that I owned, and still one of my favorites on the system. I also think it's probably the best co-op game on the system. At least for me, it's the best two-player game that I played on the system. So that's saying a lot because NES had a lot of great co-op games. But even just the single player, I just love the slower paced kind of tactical action. I mean, it is fast paced, but at the same time, it's better to play it slow and kind of clear the enemies out and move slowly. Now, of course, if you really know the game, I'm sure you can just keep driving at speed through shit and ignore all the not rescue any of the prisoners and shit like that. So, I mean, the game does have replayability if you want to try to, speed run it. It's not, I wouldn't say it's really the ultimate speed run type of game because it's not really laid out in that kind of way. But, you can go through it pretty fast. I have seen some videos of some really fast playthroughs, which is definitely cool. But, just playing the game regular, it's a really enjoyable game. I would say the difficulty is moderate. I recently did a 1cc run of both the US and the Japanese version. The Japanese version is called Final Commando, and that is on the Famicom disk system. Right here you see me dropping off the prisoners that I rescued from the houses. That's how you can get some extra points, but it's completely optional, but you can do that in each stage. Some bases are more dangerous than others that you have to clear out. But you can see you kind of just want to progress the screen slowly and take out enemies and take your time because there's no timer. It's a very different style of game from a lot of action games of the time. But yeah, Final Commando for the Famicom disk system requires you to do a 1cc completion as it doesn't offer any continues. So I did a tutorial on that version as well. It's actually missing quite a bit of content. It's a little bit shorter. It's missing a whole stage. And the final stage is really chopped up into a very short stage. So there's no horizontal scrolling in the Final Commando. There's just only vertical scrolling. So it's a narrower screen that you're working with. So overall, it's easier in some ways, but it's also, it can be harder in the sense that you have to beat it on one credit. There's no continue, so you have to just survive. So it can be a little tricky. That version took me around 2 hours to beat. And this version, I believe this version may have taken me maybe an hour to beat after I had already beaten that Japanese version. So I got my practice mostly from the Japanese version, and then I just kind of improvised the rest. I did a little extra save state practice on this version as well for the final stage, because there's a lot of surprises in the final stage and traps that I didn't know about. But yeah, you have your boss fights at the end of each stage, of course, and they're all very well done. There's a nice variety of enemies, from tanks to jeeps that are much faster than your jeep and can take you out very quick. There's jets, helicopters, multiple types of tanks. There's turrets, lasers, as you can see here. This is the only part where there's like a real obstacle navigation where you have to wait for the lasers to pass. It's the only part in the game that's like that. But there are other areas where there's like rows of turrets on the final stage. There's these rows of turrets. But for those parts, as I explained in the tutorial, you don't really want to try to drive through all that shit. There's a way to carefully play it and kind of clear out each turret. So there's a lot of strategies like that to play the game more carefully. It's really not the kind of game where you want to try to speed through it unless you really know the game, because you'll get annihilated. But it's really not that hard either. If you once you learn, you just have to memorize a little bit. You can improvise a decent amount of the game. 90% of the game, I would say, is just moving the screen slowly and taking out all the enemies. And it doesn't sound too exciting, but it's a lot of fun the way the game plays out. But there's definitely parts where you really have to know what to expect, and you can't really get by on just improvising on certain parts, because there are some traps and some nasty surprises if you don't know the game. So you just want to learn those parts, and it's good to use save and load states on an emulator to practice specific sections. Practice the stages. Now in the US version that you're seeing here, Jackal, you do get you get 3 continues. So I believe it's 3 continues, and you have 4 lives each. That's the default. So you do earn 1-ups pretty frequently, so that definitely helps. You'll probably get at least 1 or 2 lives off of points on each stage. especially if you're rescuing the hostages. If not, then you're not going to get as many points. But if you're rescuing the hostages, which are usually the prisoners of war, they're usually on your main path. There's also these stars that you can reveal, and there's 3 different types of star power-ups that are usually hidden, but you can reveal them by blowing up parts of the screen, as you'll see here in a moment. This one gives me a full missile power-up, and this is the final stage, so it's extremely useful to get this power-up on the final stage. And you can see there's a sneaky way to kind of grab it and get the fuck out without taking out the turrets. So those are some of the strategies that I cover in the tutorial version, which I'm going to link all that in this review. So check those out if interested. You can also see a tutorial for the Japanese version, which is different. So there are some differences. So I decided to do tutorials on both versions. And both of them were 1cc, but the tutorial on those games are kind of, like the final stage footage was added separately, just to show highlights of my best gameplay highlights, basically from my practice and failed attempts. I wanted to, for the tutorial, I did a refined version where I showed some of my best gameplay, since it's for demonstration purposes. But I do have the completely unedited raw runs posted up on my channel, so if you want to see how the actual runs went, the 1cc run, with all the intensity of, almost fucking it up and everything like that, you can see all that as well. I have all that up on the channel. I usually post multiple videos of a lot of these playthroughs. I'll have, a tutorial a lot of times if the game is worth making a tutorial for. And this is definitely, I would say a challenging enough game that it was worth making a tutorial for. But yeah, the machine gun always fires straight up. And it's good to just fire that at all times because enemies will run into it and you'll get some extra damage. So I just always fire the machine gun. Using a rapid fire control, I just hold the button down. And then you have your grenades and missiles. So missiles are basically just powered up grenades. The grenades become missiles once you rescue these flashing men. And they're not flashing their dick or anything. They're just flashing in color. So once you rescue one of them, you will get your missile, initially, and then after you get the next flashing man, you will get the your missile will have a spread shot to it to where the explosion breaks off into pieces. So it'll break off into 2 pieces, and then when you get the third flashing man, you will get the 4-way explosion, which is the best weapon to have. And if you can keep that, you can pull a lot of bullshit and take out a lot of enemies. But it is hard to keep without dying at all, because that means you can't die at all. But you will power it up, relatively quickly. It doesn't take that long to find more of those flashing guys. So they're in the small houses. That's the main way you upgrade your weapon. You can also get the star, which is, there are stars in a few areas that will give you a fully powered up weapon, so you can get that for instant full power up. Then the stars also, some of them will give you an extra life. Some of them will clear out all the enemies on screen. And I think that's the 3 main things that the stars do. But they're hidden like you saw. But you'll learn where they are after a while. So you can see just progressing the screen really carefully and slowly before moving forward. It's most of the game. And up at the top is going to be the final boss that I'm going to show here. And for this final boss, which is stuff that I cover in the tutorial, but I can go over it again. But for this final boss, I mainly stay in the middle and I ignore the turrets and just focus on the main thing in the middle at the top that you have to destroy. It takes 13 grenades or missiles, depending on what you have. And then you fight a tank. The tank can be really challenging if you don't understand how to fight it. So if you're going to practice anything when playing this game, just a quick tip, without watching the whole tutorial, definitely make save states on the final stage and definitely practice the final bosses because there's 2 forms and you can drain all your lives very easy on this tank. I did kind of a reckless method here where I drained out a bunch of my lives because I had 5 lives when I got here. So I did the aggressive method. I knew I had enough lives to burn through even if I got killed a lot. I knew I would be able to power through with all the lives I had left. This was for my 1cc run. So I was pretty certain I was going to get it. If my lives got down really low, there's a safe method I would have used, which I also detail in the tutorial. There's another safe method I could have used. But, so I had that to fall back on. So I would have gotten the 1cc regardless, most likely, on this attempt. But, yeah, very cool final bosses. And it's an awesome game. I mean, I think the stages are awesome. I love the layout. It's an exciting game to play through. I even enjoyed it when I had to start it over because it was just such a fun game to play through. And I actually like this game quite a bit better than Contra and Super C, which are, you know, the big action games by Konami, the big shooters, I guess you could say, by Konami. And, you know, those are awesome co-op games as well on the NES, and just awesome single-player games. But for me, this is better in all aspects. I really, really enjoy this game. Great soundtrack, everything about it I really like. And it still holds up great today, so I'd give this game a 9 out of 10. Let me know if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.